Good afternoon. We're back together again. I'd like to talk about launching Module 4. And I have 6 topics I'd like to cover to recap what we've done and talk a little bit about the module that we'll be entering into in a day or two. So, Step 2, targeted needs assessment. The feedback is in the grade book. Everyone's doing great work. Really enjoy reading your papers and about your curriculum. The peer learning teams are really asking productive questions. Continue contributing to your team. Really good questions. I think it's helpful both to the receiver of the feedback as well as hopefully you can see some other examples of curriculum development. I would say many of you pointed out in your descriptions that there are many outcomes to targeted needs assessments in addition to providing information to develop the curriculum. And I think the most common one, which is not surprising, is that doing the needs assessments enables you to receive buy-in for your curriculum from your learners, from your other stakeholders. So it was good to see that observation by many of you. So, okay, so topic 2 is we're going to launch Module 4, Goals and Objectives. We're going to start on the 22nd of March. We're going to run through April 6th. This is an extra week built in there because hopefully some of you will be enjoying spring break in various locations around the world. So the assignment here is, again, a chapter in the Thomas Curran, etc. book, chapter 4. And then also, we've posted a 18-minute video, YouTube video on writing meaningful learning objectives that I think you might find helpful. It's by a pediatric faculty member at Virginia Commonwealth, so I think it's a good, down-to-earth, practical way to think about and prepare learning objectives. So go ahead and you'll be posting your questions and comments about this module to the discussion board if you have any. We've had some really good discussion over the last 2 or 3 modules on that. So it'll be open for your observations and questions at the beginning of the module on the 22nd. Okay, so next topic, Step 3, which the Thomas Curran book calls focusing the curriculum. So I would say we're now pivoting from what I would call the front-end analysis in steps 1 and 2 to developing the actual curriculum with goals and objectives, educational strategies, and evaluation and feedback. This is the material that people often see. It's a visible part of the curriculum. So what happens is you need to triage all of these needs you've identified, probably many of which you won't be able to address in your curriculum. Maybe some, you can get most of them. But you need to triage those needs and then create what I would call actionable goals and objectives, the things that are going to drive the decisions about what your learners are going to accomplish, how you're going to accomplish it through the strategies, and how you're going to evaluate it with your evaluation strategies. So one point I do want to make, and it's actually made in the chapter, and I think many of you would observe this from your own personal experience as a learner as well as a faculty member. Most educational experiences encompass much more than the list of preconceived objectives. Certainly the objectives are important, and the goals and objectives are important. They help focus the education, but there's a lot going on, a lot of unintended learning, a lot of learning from the environment that they're in. So I would just want to put a marker there and recognize that your learners are going to get a lot out of this curriculum that may or may not be in the objectives. So just a point that may come up as part of our discussion in this module. Okay, topic 4 is just a reminder that we will be you'll be posting your responses by 1 April to the Google Drive with the questions around your broad educational goals, some 3 to 5 sample measurable objectives for these goals, an assessment of are these measurable? How could you rewrite them if you've already have them? If you haven't, then take a stab at writing them. How do you think those are going to focus your program's content, methods, and strategies? And again, just thinking about the larger context you're in and how that affected the selection of goals and objectives. And then by April 4th, you will be responding to your peers, and we'll be back on our normal schedule. So a couple of the last 2 points, a couple of reminders. This is just material. It's in the chapter, but I just wanted to draw your attention to this. There's often a lot of confusion about what's a goal and what's an objective. And just so the authors recognize this, and so what we're going to do for the purpose of this course, and I think this is reasonable, is they're going to use the term goals when they're speaking of broad educational objectives. And they're going to use the term objectives, which are things that are specific and measurable objectives. So I think that's the distinction, and they go into some description and detail on this. But I just wanted to say this is often a point of confusion. So I think for our purpose, we'll use this kind of distinction. And I think it's going to be the specific measurable objectives that are the actionable part of this, because they're going to permit the content refinement and guide selection of the strategies you use, and as well as the what's being evaluated. You're going to be evaluated. You're going to evaluate the curriculum on the learning objectives, or the objectives more generally. These are important. Objectives have a lot of functions in this in a curriculum. And I think the 5 that Thomas Curran et al. Mention are worth repeating. First of all, they will direct your choice of content and curriculum priorities, because you will have lots of possible needs. You will have lots of content that your stakeholders, if you have many faculty, feel like they want to teach. But you're going to use your learning objectives will be your kind of North Star to make a decision about what to include and what your priorities will be. The kind of objectives you have will suggest the most optimal learning methods. So if you have a skill objective, it's probably not most optimal to have just the delivery of knowledge. So that will be a second reason. The objectives will enable evaluation of the learners and of the curriculum. So this is going to be your target. This is what you're going to evaluate about, are these objectives. And really, the objectives also finally communicate to all of your stakeholders, your learners, your leadership, the public, everyone, what you hope to achieve with the curriculum. So it's really, in that sense, they serve as kind of a communication and a public relations function, and for that reason are really important. So those are some of the reasons that we have goals and objectives, and hopefully we can explore some of that during the module. Now, finally. There's a lot of question about how to state objectives and so on. I think I would urge you to look at the video. I think he speaks to a lot of the reason for having objectives. And they are, you'll see these 5 characteristics. Objectives must be specific and measurable. And the 5 characteristics are who, will do, how much or how well, of what, by when. Those are your 5 elements of a good and effective objective. And finally, the book, and I really like what they've done with this, that they really point to 3 types of objectives that you can include in your curriculum design. First are the ones we're most familiar with, which are the learner objectives. The cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. different types of outcomes. And they also point out, and Table 3 is very helpful in this regard, that you could write objectives for individual learners as well as for the program. So take a look at that. I think it's a good distinction and worthwhile. So that's the first one, learner objectives. Secondly, you might have process objectives, which really relate to the implementation of the curriculum. And did the implementation, did it have a fidelity to your plan? Did it change? How many learners were involved, and so on and so forth. Did they value the curriculum, and all of those kinds of questions. So those are worthwhile process objectives. And finally, what they term outcome objectives, and they use this term, and they go into some detail explaining this, but they use this term outcome to mean health outcomes or healthcare outcomes or patient outcomes. So that's how they've circumscribed that definition. So think about that. Consider whether your curriculum it almost certainly will have learner objectives, hopefully, but also it may be of value to have process and outcome objectives if that is relevant to the curriculum you're developing. So anyway, I hope you all have a great spring break. Hope you're doing something fun and interesting in addition to learning. So I will be around. I will be accessible. So again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we will engage for the next couple of weeks on goals and objectives. So have a good week.